In this conversation, we do a little bit of CIRS real talk, a lot of nuance. Should you start VIP early? Is there any harm with starting VIP early? What about different binders other than prescription grade? How clean does the environment need to be? How clean is clean? And then what about dogs when it comes to MARCoNS? And at what point do you look beyond CIRS? I now eat a lot of meat, and so do they. If you want to thrive, you need to eat meat. Meat is required. Hey guys, my name is Judy Cho and I'm board certified in holistic nutrition, and I have a private functional medicine practice where we focus on root cause healing, and that often starts with the Carnivore Cures all meat elimination diet. Today I had the pleasure of sitting down with one of our lead practitioners, Cheryl. She's been on our podcast a few times. I will put our other interviews in the show notes, and we talk a lot about chronic illness, but in this conversation we talk about some nuances about CIRS. We obviously, in the CIRS or chronic inflammatory response syndrome protocol, we talk about taking binders, especially a cholesterol reducing binder that's used off label for removing biotoxins. It works beautifully if it works. But what about testing for cholesterol levels? What about actinos? And when CIRS isn't working enough, there's a bacteria that can be growing in the home called actinos and then growing on your skin. What about the mind body stuff and having a pet? We talk about all these nuances, if it's even ideal to get on VIP early, and what are the ramifications if we do. And a lot of this information, we have created articles so that we will also put that in the show notes. If you don't follow my newsletter, I highly recommend it because that's the only place lately that we are putting our latest articles. I also share updates about the new book that I'm writing, and I share a lot more of the behind the scenes clinical pearls, and it's really only in the newsletter right now because that's my capacity at this moment. So if you are not following the newsletter, I highly recommend following it. I will also put that in the show notes. But in this conversation, we get super nuanced so that it gives you pearls and tips and tools if you are following a chronic inflammatory response syndrome protocol and you are not healing enough. Okay, guys, let's get right into the interview. Hey, Cheryl, thanks for joining me again today. I had brought up that we should have a conversation about real talk about CIRS,
Yeah.
chronic inflammatory response syndrome, mold illness, and what we have seen after treating so many people, and just having some real talk about some of the most common questions, concerns. And
Yeah.
maybe we could just start with like a couple minutes on what you really define as CIRS, not really what CIRS is by
Right.
definition, but what you view CIRS is, and then I'll add anything to it.
That's so true. Like, what do we see it as on our side of the camera? Because I think that we probably more than most practices, whether it be, doctors' offices or practitioners or, you name it, I think we're diagnosing a lot of people with SIRS. I think because, you go down to meat, salt, and water, and when that's still not working, and we're getting people who have been chasing their health for decades, mold illness is a lot of times the rock that people don't want to turn over. And to me, that's kind of what it boils down to. I mean, I feel like we could probably talk for like 8 hours and I could still be talking, but it boils down to an immune system that has become so inflamed that it cannot calm down because essentially the environment it's waking up in every day is unsafe. And I know that's like a really grim statement to make. And I want to turn that around at the same time that I'm making a grim statement, because most houses, I would say, and I kind of have adopted this statistic over time, that I would say of the, of all the years I've been working here, probably 99% of people's homes that have SIRS are not safe for them to heal in. And
Right.
that's hard to hear. But I always tell people you need to turn your genetics into your superpower, not the handicap, right? So you're finding out something major that has been making you sick for a really long time. So it's like, it's so turnaroundable. But that's what it boils down to for me. It's that it's this poor immune system that is wanting to do so bad every day things that should be automatic: digestion, you know, exercise recovery, normal periods, fertility, all these things that we take for granted that are just like things a body should do. They get completely put on the back burner because an immune system is just totally on fire. And and it's being driven by a combination of genetics and waking up in an environment that's unsafe for those genetics.
Yeah, I think that's really good. Would you say that CIRS or chronic inflammatory response syndrome is just mold or all mold?
I don't think it's just mold or all mold. And one thing I try to break down for clients too is that it's very possible that maybe mold is not even your body's biggest issue. I say, like, if I had a magic 8 ball and I could shake that magic 8 ball and it was going to tell me what your body's biggest issue is, it may not even be mold. But if you try to heal in a moldy environment and you have the CIRS genetics, or you happen to just be sensitive to CIRS, I mean, you've seen it just as many times as I have that you can have CIRS and not have the genetics. It's just a lot less common. So whether it's a genetic piece or a mold sensitivity piece, you're not going to heal in that environment, even if some sort of rare autoimmune condition is your body's actual biggest issue, or Lyme or a co-infection, because that's just too heavy to deal with. It's too nagging. It's too persistent. It's too every day. It's too every second of every day.
Right.
It's where you lay down to go to sleep. It's where you try to heal. It's where you're eating and trying to rest and digest. It's all in this same environment that your body's like, well, this isn't safe. This isn't safe. And it's like, that could lead us right into talking about mind body and how important it is to feel safe in your own body, and to even just be able to say the statement to your body, it's okay to heal. Like, it's okay. We're in a safe place. We can heal now.
Yeah, I think Dr. Shoemaker says that 25% of the population has the HLA genetics that basically would turn on CIRS. So all it is that your immune system, one side of the immune system does not communicate well with the other side. That helps the inflammation to go down. So you start to build systemic inflammation in the body, and all that noise then keeps the immune system constantly activated, and that makes you sick longer term. And it can manifest in many different ways, whether it's hormones, as you were saying, all the different things. And mold, as you're saying, even if it's not mold solely that is your issue, if you are breathing in fungus, mycotoxins, being exposed to it, we breathe in so much stuff. And so if we then breathe in a lot of the mycotoxins, it just makes the immune system that much more flared. Just like if we're eating gluten all the time or grains or eating certain foods that are always constantly triggering the gut, it's the same thing that's happening with mold. So if we can reduce the noise with food, that will help a ton. And then the next big step, if you can reduce a lot of the noise from what we're breathing in, that will also help a ton. And for many, that's enough to have a lot of healing. And for some people, it goes beyond that. The one thing I did want to say about the HLA is, so even though 25% have the genetics, not all 25% have CIRS. So it's only a subset
Yes.
of that it's been activated. Why? Who knows? It could be some of the mind body, it could be some of infections, as you were
That's
mentioning.
such a popular question. And
Oh,
it's such an impossible question to answer because there's so many things. And the more years I work in this space, the more I feel like factors into it. I
totally.
feel like it's like it goes back to some of the stuff we literally ask on the paperwork when we start working with clients. It's like I will say to people, I think it goes back as far to like, were you breastfed? Like, how much trauma have you had in your life? And these are things people aren't thinking of, right? They're thinking of like, well, how many moldy buildings have I lived in? And they're like, well, that was just that one college dorm where I could see it. And it's like, oh, I wish it was that simple. I wish it was that simple that we could say to somebody, where have you lived that you could see it? And then we could just have this perfect solution. And I wish it was I wish that's how it went, but it's so much more complex than that. It's like, how many siblings are in your family and how close together were you born and where are you in that order? And, were you chronically ill as a child and were you on antibiotics a lot? And there's so much that goes into it. You know what I mean? And I wish it was so simple like that. And it's like, what type of food were you brought up on? Like there's so many things that go into it. And then there's some people, I say that all the time to clients. And I say, I know this isn't some of the easier stuff to hear, but it's some of the things I want you to understand to fully grasp kind of what's going on. And I think there's plenty of people that will live a full life with CIRS genetics. And,
Right.
maybe at the end they might say, yeah, I don't know, once in a while I get headaches and, my right knee hurts once in a while, but it's never the type of people that we would see come to work with us one-on-one saying like, I've been searching for a cure for 20 years and I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's driving it. I don't know what to do. I don't know what supplement to take. I don't know what medication I don't know what doctor to go to. They'll just, live their life and magically something never triggered it.
Yeah. I know that Dr. Shoemaker, when he first started CIRS, and it wasn't even defined as chronic inflammatory response syndrome initially, but it was very focused on biotoxins, especially mold. I think he first found it through like a fishermen were getting sick being
Yes.
exposed to Listeria. But I really think that what happens is there's just a genetically susceptible group of people that we talked about with the HLA,
Mhm.
and then their toxin bucket gets full. And it's whether it's one thing that really triggers it, but something, then once it's overflowing or the bucket is flimsy, that is what then causes chronic illness. And it can manifest in some people as mental illness. Some people it'll manifest as joint pain. Some people it'll manifest as autoimmune. And so when people say, is it just the moldy homes? I don't think so. I mean, I think Dr. Shoemaker even says COVID can trigger CIRS. A really strong traumatic brain injury can trigger CIRS. A really bad food poisoning can trigger it. It's just if you are susceptible and then your bucket is already full, that and then your trauma, medications,
Yep.
stuff you've taken in the past, shots you've gotten in the past, all of that will fill this. And then if you are not capable, once it overflows, that's what you feel is what's making you feel unwell. But that's why it's such a big bucket we call CIRS, but a big thing that affects that is what we're breathing. And that's why I think we go after mold so much. And yeah, so I don't want people to think, well, what triggered it? Was it a certain home? And a lot of times, most of our clients and patients, they have lived in moldy homes. Like they
Oh
have
yeah.
had
Yep.
that exposure. So obviously our practice doesn't follow Dr. Shoemaker's protocol to the letter. We do in many aspects, but then we are always holistic too, where we'll say, okay, we need to really support the gut, or we may need to try other binders that maybe Dr. Shoemaker wouldn't even
Yep.
recommend. So I'm curious for you, because his first step is the place has to be as clean as possible, and if it's not clean, you can't heal further. What are your thoughts of like how clean is clean?
That's a good one. That's a good one. I think it's hard for people to hear this, that, how clean is going to be different for every person. So I've seen some people get monumental results taking prescription binders, still living in exposure, for different reasons, whether their remediation is not done, whether they financially are just not going to be able to remediate. And they say, you know what? This just is what it is. I cannot remediate. I cannot move. That's not happening certainly anytime soon, but I want to see how far I can get with healing. Sometimes those people do wonderful on a prescription binder and they get, they might come to us with like 12 symptoms that are really bothering them. And in 6 or 7 months, we're only looking at 5 or 6 of them now. And for somebody that's got 12 symptoms, cutting them in half, that's a lot. And then sometimes I see people that they are chasing that environment where it's like, we remediated and I'm on the binder and it seems like, and then they retest the home and it's like it improved, but that person didn't really improve. So I think there's also within the CIRS community, there's also levels of sensitivity for the people that have CIRS, triggered and activated CIRS. I think that some people, and these numbers will make sense to some people and not others. We could probably do a whole podcast on just the envirobinomics testing at minimum. And Judy's talked about it on another podcast where you did CIRS on a budget. And, it hurts me too is at minimum what you want to have your home tested for or a potential home you're moving in. And the standard number is, 10 or below. But then it kind of is in the fine print now where it's like most people will feel better in an 8 or below. And it's like, then there's also people that, we work with that, people that, can't even walk down the, perfume area in the mall or, can't even have their neighbors with dryer sheets and like super, super sensitive. And they're on like all unaged beef and, every sensitivity in the world. Those are probably the people that are going to probably need more like a 3 or below, and it gets very nuanced and it's hard to know like what number is exact. So of course, just like everything else, even like kids in a public school see it, like there has to be a norm somewhere. Eventually there has to be a number that's picked, right? And there's statistics to back it up to say most people can heal here.
Right.
And so that's, most people are going to be okay in a 10 or below, but there's going to be people that aren't. So it's like you always want to strive for the cleanest environment within reason.
I totally agree with you. I also think that the mind body component is a big factor.
So big.
So, given that, If you go into a building that your body remembers got them sick through mold illness, and so even if you remediated, your nervous system may remember, I have to get into fighting mode because this place got me sick. And even if there's no mold in the home still, now the body is tenses up going back, and there might be memories of the remediation or not knowing how you feel, and then you're in bed all the time, and now you're trying to heal in a place. Like there's a saying that says you can't heal in a place that got you sick. So I think there's some of that too. So maybe it's not about the Hertz me score or the ERMI score, and it's more of how much is your system dysregulated and you're actually fearful of being in that place, or that you doubt that you'll get better in the
Yep.
place. And not to get religious, but even in the Bible, it says, in all scriptures, in Leviticus, it says, bring out a priest, which you can consider the IAP, make them test it. And then if they say, okay, there's mold, remove it and then fix it. And then they say, then have them come out and then have them come out. And then eventually, if it's not enough, then you have to burn the house down. And so, I mean, it said that thousands of years ago. And I think it's a sign that for some people, maybe it's not a how clean the home is, but maybe you just have to start new. And I know that's again not an easy conversation,
No.
but there might be something about that place, whether it's really the ERMI or Hurts Me Too score, it could just be that there's just emotional baggage there for whatever reason. And it's not going to be the place you heal. And I know that these are all factors that are so nuanced, and it's like, how do you know? And I think those are great questions, but that's where I think working with somebody or working with a practitioner is super important, because that will help you delineate, do you think it's just time to move on? One thing I do want to say is, even if your place is clean enough or not clean enough, once you're on the binder and you're following the protocol, after like a good 3 months, if you're not moving the needle at all, something's off. And
Yep.
if your environment supposedly is clean, but you're not healing to some level, then something is off. And that's when a practitioner or with you should dig deeper of like, is it something beyond mold? Or I don't think it's just 3 months that we take for mold, but you should see some movement.
Yes. I think when you're on the marriage of the right binder and a clean environment, you should be able to have a conversation at the 3 month mark that something's improving. It may not be
Right.
as much as you would have wished it would be, because, you know, I think there's a saying in the natural space that like, and I forget the exact time frame, but it's like tenfold in terms of healing. So it's like for as many years as you've not been well, it's going to take X amount of time to get ready. I mean, and to get better. And so it takes a long time to get better. It's not like an overnight thing, but you should at least see micro improvements where it's like, you know, like let's take, for example, we have a lot of clients that wake up during the night to use the bathroom, right? So it's like, you know, I used to get up 3 times a night to pee, and now all of a sudden I notice it's like one, sometimes, you know, it's definitely not even two anymore. You know, that's a big difference for somebody getting up disrupted 3 times a night down to one, you know, so it's like your story improves, right? Like you don't always realize it when you're in the middle of it, but if you take like a 3 month break from telling your story and then all of a sudden you like tell it, it's like, whoa, that story is actually a little bit different, you know, unless you know, sometimes if you hyper focus on it every day and you're like, but I'm still peeing at night, but I'm still peeing at night, but I'm still peeing at night. It's like, you don't even realize that it has improved because it didn't go away.
Yep.
Right. So that's where like symptom tracking becomes important. Or like I said, sometimes just taking a break from telling your story.
Yep.
Like, you know what I mean? Just put it on the back burner and just stay in your lane, do your protocol, live in your environment that hopefully is clean, and just live your life in gratitude, right? And then when you tell your story again in 3 months, there might be some improvements.
Right. And I'll bring up Actinos in a second, because I know people will say, well, maybe it's not mold, maybe it's Actinos. So we'll talk
Yep.
about that in a second of when you pivot from CIRS. What about binders? So the recommended binders is CSM and Welcall, primarily because of the size and the opposite charge. So then you could bind to the biotoxins. But we've also now been doing this clinically for many years.
Yeah.
And so what are your thoughts about the different binders? Hey guys, just a really quick break. Nutrition with Judy's private practice is now called Empower Functional Health. I started as a nutritional therapist, but we have become much more all-encompassing. At Empower Functional Health, we do functional medicine, chronic illness, autoimmune, gut health, environmental illness such as CIRS, mold illness, Lyme. Regardless of all these names, the goal for us is always to get you root cause healing answers. And of course, carnivore, the all meat elimination diet is always on the table. Food, the right food, is always medicine. We offer functional tests, prescription meds, and really everything to get you closer to root cause, where you can just eat the meats you enjoy and live the life that you are meant to symptom-free. The goal is to get off meds, supplements, and everything else that your body no longer needs support in. Our practice, whether it's Nutrition with Judy, sharing podcasts and free content, or our private practice, Empower Functional Health, our goal is to support you guys in the barbell theory. We give a lot of free content, our evidence-based research. We don't use Substack. We give all our stuff away for free. We interview with the best and make it super tactical so you have clinical pearls that you can walk away with and try in your own healing journey. And then we work with some people in a smaller subset, one-on-one, to provide that level of personalized care. And as we heal these people that are chronically ill, we find these clinical pearls and golden nuggets that we can share then more publicly so that we can make wellness for all. Hopefully, the content and the guides and the free stuff we give out is enough for you to heal. But if it's not, you can always come and work with us in our private practice so that you can get more personalized care. If you want to learn more, make sure to check out empowerfunctionalhealth.com.
What I've seen is that depending on the person's level of sensitivity, sometimes the prescriptions are a little harder to tolerate.
Yes.
I've been seeing a recent string of success, I would say, with Wellcall, because it seems easier to tolerate for a lot of our clients. And I don't know if this is actual, there's science to back this up, but I've noticed in practice, it seems like females especially are able to tolerate Wellcall better a lot of times. And I've also noticed that when you go prescription, you have to bring in less other biohacks. When you go natural binders, you got to work harder. Like you got to bring in the sauna. You got to, maybe rotate binders. You got to take them, it's a little more nuanced when you go with natural binders. Your supplement protocol oftentimes has to be a little bit larger because you just have to work a little bit harder because they're not as strong. They don't pull it out the same way. They don't pull it out as efficiently. And you have to bring in the other modalities. You have to be diligent with castor oil packs and sauna and mind body. I mean, listen, everybody should be doing mind body, but you know what I mean? The other biohacks really have to come out, and I can't even sit here and list them all because for everybody, they're different.
Right.
Like the type of nervous system that please do not make me cold plunge, please. But we have clients that swear by them. Like, it's like, that is their, 2 to 3 times a week. That is their reset. And they feel like $1 million doing it. And so like, I'm not going to say, don't do that to them. Like that's a good one. That really helps your vagal nerve function and, your body's ability to recover and stuff. But I think when you do the natural binders, I think that you have to bring out the other biohacks even harder.
Yeah, I agree. I really think it just depends on how hard do you want to go and how fast do you want to go? And for some people, like you said, and we have many people that we've worked with where CSM or cholestyramine off-label is too hard and they have to start on a really, really small dose and it just takes them longer, but they don't have to do all the other biohacks. But the risk with always pharmaceuticals is there's always a risk of other stuff. Now, even supplements have that in long-term use, but like cholestyramine, for example, the real reason we're supposed to be using it is to reduce cholesterol. So my next question then to you is, how important is it to test cholesterol?
It's so important. And I feel like we are one of I'm not going to say the only one, because I know there's people out there doing it this way too, but we are one of the only practices that emphasizes it as much as we do, which is ironic because we're one of the only ones recommending the diet that would keep the cholesterol robust enough despite being on a prescription binder. So you would think that we would be the ones being lax about it. Like, oh, as long as you're on a carnivore diet, you're good.
Yeah.
That's not the truth, right? We emphasize being on those fatty acid supports, which our favorites are, I think you should link these in the show notes because I could do a whole podcast or 10 on the quality of fish oil. And we're really adamant about the ones we recommend because not only do they work, but I always tell people, my goodness, what it takes for wild caught cold water fishermen to catch a fish, keep it alive for the right amount of time, get it to shore, get it to then the parties that pull out the oil and encapsulate it for a shelf to get to you. There's not that many doing it right, but we recommend places that are doing it right. So you need to be on them high dose plus a carnivore diet. Plus, you should really honestly be checking your cholesterol like every 6 weeks, because from what we see, that's the one where it can be a real slow creep in. So it's like the client will be like, I don't know, like, everything seems okay, but I've been feeling kind of foggy lately, like not myself, like a little bit short-tempered. I don't know, like borderline depressed. Like it just doesn't seem like myself. And the first thing that I'm like, we need to check your cholesterol. We need to see what's going on. It is the backbone for all of our hormones. Yet over the years, what they have done to the norms is like make it more and more narrow because the statin industry is a big moneymaker, right? Like that's a whole, I feel like I'm like rattling off things we could talk about on other podcasts for hours, right? But that's a whole nother thing going on in our world right now is like the tighter that window is for what's considered normal is, it's
Yeah,
more of
yeah.
a window to, put people on statins. But anyway, so now it's like if your cholesterol is over 200, your total cholesterol, you belong on a statin.
I think it's
So it's
190, but yeah, same thing.
so it's like it's crazy. So I mean, we want to see people's cholesterol high before they start a prescription binder. And if it's not, I say to people, listen, we really need to talk about your diet, your fish oils. We got to get that up a little bit before you even start a prescription binder because it's a cholesterol binding agent. It's a bile sequestrant, cholesterol binding agent. So the only other people on it are people with bile acid malabsorption. I
Right.
mean, those are the subset of people taking it for the other reasons.
Yeah, it's when I first learned about CIRS, so many people wanted to bypass, okay, well, I don't have to do gut, maybe I don't have to do carnivore, I don't have to do all this stuff, and I'm just gonna go because I found my root cause. And so we tried that for some people, and they had to go back to square one of, okay, we need to still work on your gut, we need to do all, and we need to make sure that you're following a close to carnivore diet as much as possible. And like you said, all of these issues with cholesterol started coming up where people were having brain fog, like I can't do my Sudoku all of a sudden. And it's so the same issues that you were having why you wanted to do CIRS protocol, the brain fog, the memory recall, the word recall. Now you're having similar symptoms. And so then we started saying, make sure to check your cholesterol. And lo and behold, a lot of these people had really low cholesterol. People, right, especially if they're not checking their cholesterol, may be taking CSM and thinking, I'm getting depression. I must be in exposure. When in reality, it could be your cholesterol level. So
Absolutely.
even if your doctor does not test it, there are so many labs online that will
Oh,
easily
yeah.
run cholesterol for cheap and probably cheaper than we could ever afford. You should go and test your cholesterol, especially if you're on these sequestrants long term,
Yes.
because like Cheryl was saying, your hormones, your every cell, the outer layer is wrapped by this fat. And so if you are now stripping away cholesterol, it will strip it from your cells. And if your cell is not strong and robust, it will let things in that it's not supposed to. It'll kill your mitochondria. Your brain is 60% fat. So imagine you're taking these cholesterol binders and you're not taking extra cholesterol. You're eating a non-carnivore diet because some people in the CIRS community believes that it's not the proper nutrition.
Mm,
And so you may be doing a worse harm to your body and
absolutely.
if you are not monitoring. And so that's where again, while CSM is so much more potent even than Welchol, you have to be therefore that much more mindful of your cholesterol levels. You have to be thoughtful of your bile acids. So if all of a sudden you're not able to tolerate fat and you have loose stools on CSM, it could be that you're pulling out too much bile acid and now you can't even digest your fat. So these nuances actually matter a ton. And so thank you for bringing up those things.
So for sure, if you're not sensitive to butter, butter makes everything taste better. So bring it on.
Yeah, yeah. What about your thoughts on VIP early? VIP is obviously the last step of the whole CIRS protocol. The assumption is that your environment's clean. A lot of your inflammatory markers have now been balanced. So all of the mini fires you have in your system have been quelled. So your markers should be relatively within range. I have multiple thoughts on that, but some people they want to get on VIP faster because they will feel better. They'll have more
Yes.
energy. Maybe their TGF will go
They've
down
heard all the success stories.
and their energy goes up and especially their mental fog goes away. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts about VIP too early?
I think there's a big risk with VIP too early. I think that you really need to, so there's a handful of things I think you really need to make sure before you start VIP. I think you really should be in a clean environment. And I know we're going back to the environment again, but that's why it's step one. And we always say this, and we're not the only ones to say this, but it's the hardest step. I wish it wasn't, but it is. It's the hardest step. And people seem to revisit that step even, right? Like it's like I thought my home was clean, but I got to jump back to that step. It's part of it. But anyway, I think you need to be in a clean environment. And I think we're seeing more of this because we've been talking about it behind the scenes, is that you're not always going to see every single inflammatory marker get within the shoemaker standard norm ranges for like not diagnosable for CIRS. What you want to look for is a really, really nice improvement, right?
Yes.
So if like somebody's C4A started out in like the 3000s and now we're down to like, 900. Okay, so that's still diagnosable for CIRS, right? Because it's over the 600 something, but it's a huge improvement, right? So it's kind of like I say to people sometimes, like, let's say you came to me, and I don't like when this is people's main goal, but let's say your main goal is to lose weight, right? And all of a sudden, like 4 months later, the scale hasn't moved much, but your jeans all fit
Right.
now, right? And you feel a lot better. So it's like, I'm much more concerned with how jeans fit than how the scale looks. So it's not to say that I don't care what the numbers show. I want the numbers to improve, but I love when I'm on a call with somebody and they're talking about the symptoms cluster on the VCS test. So I definitely want to link the VCS test in the show notes, but that those symptoms clusters are so important to me. When I can get on a call with a client and we're like 3 or 4 or 5 months in and they're like, "Oh, no, I don't feel that anymore." And they actually sometimes will look at what they put in the beginning and go, "Oh my God, I forgot my eyes used to burn." And
Right.
I'm like, they did. You checked it off. And there was another area where it was blurry vision, and you checked that off too, And they're like, I totally don't have that anymore. So when you can be on a call with a client and they're talking to you about their quality of life improving, that's where it's like that to me is a very strong case where VIP is like warranted, right? Like numbers have at least improved and
Right.
symptoms are a lot better because that's the body really speaking to me saying like I'm healing, right? Because we know that other things can trigger these inflammatory markers to go off. It's not there's never going to be for any diagnosis out there a perfect test. Never. Because
Right.
there's always things that can skew it. There's always things that can throw off labs. There's always things that you could be exposed to like the day before. I mean, I'm pretty clear with people like, hey, listen, your insurance is either paying a lot of money for this blood work or you're paying a lot of money for this blood work. So at least for a week or so before that blood work, try and be pretty cautious of where you go. These are people that have homes that have been remediated. I'm like, that would be the week to probably not take your kid to the moldy movie theater or the aquarium. Like, let's try and tone it down that 1 week before the blood work so we get a true measure of where you're spending your time,
Right.
like where you're healing. And I think that it's a very slippery slope because if you start VIP too early, there's a risk of number one, it not working at all. Number two, inflaming you more.
Yeah.
And then number three, there's also the obvious financial piece of it, right? Like, we
Not cheap.
most doctors will usually say, give it a few months, right? Like at least give it a few months. But if you're not feeling any difference in a few months, then it's probably not going to be that amazing experience for you. But you waste a lot of money in 3 months. So you want to make sure your body's ready for it. It's definitely not something you want to rush.
Yeah, we initially were thinking, why not just bypass everything and just go to VIP if people can feel better? Let's just give symptom relief right away. And then we looked into it and did the research and we're like, oh, actually, we can't do
Yeah.
that. And we wrote a detailed article on that. And
Hmm.
so I will link to that. I should have taken notes on this call, but I'll totally look back and then write some of the notes and I'll put everything in the show notes. But what research we found by doing and looking at what happens when you start VIP too early, essentially VIP is a peptide and it regulates and modulates your immune system. So all it's doing is it will rebalance your immune system. If your immune system is flared and inflamed because of things that are causing it to have those issues, you're basically using VIP to turn down those signals, but those signals are still there. And so the issue then becomes that you may cause bigger issues downstream or down the road with now you've used VIP, now it's changing the way that your immune system is signaling each other. And now there's a bigger inflammatory response later, and VIP is not going to solve it anymore.
No.
And so that is the deal you're making basically by taking it early. And then it can also cause higher histamine responses and mast cell because again,
Yes.
this bucket is overflowing and you're just like duct taping everything and trying to keep the thing in the bucket. But by taking VIP now, it's like maybe the bucket can hold more, but eventually the spillage now will even be bigger and worse. And that is the biggest risk. And we get super nuanced in the article. It talks about Th1, Th17, different immune responses, inflammatory. So you do not, I know people have been sick for so long and you're just so tired that you're like, just give me whatever to make me feel better.
Yep.
I totally understand that. But I think as practitioners, we have to have that due diligence and we always have to have the person's care as our priority. And so even though
100%.
I have the drug that can make you skinny tomorrow, right? I know long term that can ruin your gut or I can give you VIP, but in a year your inflammatory response may be worse. But hey, I did my job in that moment. That is no different than people taking statins and
Nope.
all the like, oh, you don't feel well, let me give you a steroid. That's exactly what conventional medicine does. And so while functional medicine is longer, more expensive, and frustrating, it can actually get you root cause answers. And so that's where I really believe, yes, if you are getting better, I don't think you necessarily need to hit all the markers in the ranges that is required in the CIRS model. Because we could talk about TGF right now, but you should see symptom improvement. Your environment should be relatively clean
Yep.
and then get on it. Because if you don't, you can be making a bigger fire in your body that you never expected. And I don't know how much you can reverse from that. So that
Totally.
is my caution with getting on VIP. I'll just say a really quick thing about TGF. So TGF seems to be one of the markers that are so hard to lower. And so I keep doing research on TGF. I'm writing my next book. And so I was looking at atrazine. That's just one example of many things. So autoimmune, stress, having even metabolic issues, all of these things can cause TGF beta to go high.
Stress. Nobody's stressed.
I know, right? Even, yeah. So, and we have to understand that all of these SIRS markers, they are not SIRS specific. So TGF does not
Right.
mean you are SIRS
Right.
illness, right? It's that all of these markers in a
Yep.
certain way, combination plus environment plus symptoms plus medical history, therefore equals a SIRS diagnosis. So just because your TGF beta is high does not mean you are an exposure. It does not mean that. And so I want people to understand we are having the hardest time reducing TGF beta 1. So
Yep.
I looked into it. If you have any bit of gluten exposure, it can increase your TGF beta 1. So I was looking into water and all the chemicals. So atrazine is one of the biggest herbicides used on GMO foods, especially corn, and it is in our waters. It's pervasive. If you use a filter, if it's not reverse osmosis, it will not remove that. If
Wow.
you are exposed to that, it will cause an inflammatory response in your system and it will raise TGF beta 1. If you eat gluten, again, it will raise TGF beta 1. So I don't want people to be chasing numbers and saying, I'm still in mold, I'm still in this, because it is not always true. This is
Right.
where that nuance really matters. So I would look up what else raises TGF beta 1 and then see, am I exposed to that? So one example with atrazine is it will also raise C4A, and I think it raises, I forget which other SIRS marker it raises. But if those three are the ones that are just always high for you, but your environment's good and your symptoms are getting better, it could be atrazine. And then you may want to test your water, right? So it's not always just SIRS, just building, just I need more binders. So I just wanted to put that nuance out there. Let's move on and talk about mind body. I don't want to get super into it because we've had so many multiple videos. I'll put that in the notes. But we talk about pets, and a lot of times
Mm.
there are conversations about, well, dogs can carry MARCoNS, and so maybe having a pet is not good for you. I'd love to know your thoughts about the mind body, making sure we have a regulated nervous system so that our body's primed to heal. But what are your thoughts about pets and other stuff?
I have to laugh when someone says the word pets to me because I'm over here losing in my house. I have a 9-year-old son who literally has overrun the house with reptiles.
And my boys are
Something I
jealous.
something I never thought I would even have. I was totally not into having anything like that in a cage, but then you have a kid that's into it, and that's what happens. But I think that the risk reward with pets, the reward is so much more confounding.
Yeah.
Like the joy that pets bring, especially since, I mean, let's face it, most people that have pets, it's a pet that they chose, right? I mean, you have a dog, you wanted a dog, you have a cat, you wanted a cat. And so they bring so much joy to your life that I think, to me, it's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer. I think that there's so many things, that are nuanced within CIRS where it's like, what's the risk? What's the reward? It's like, you order from Amazon, right? Like it came from a truck. Do I wipe it off or do I just bring it in the house? These are things that some of our clients really, really worry about. And it's like risk reward. You ordered something from Amazon, bring it in the house. Like, you know what I mean? I think that, and there's also studies out there, like scientific studies, that your microbiome is more diverse when you have a dog because they're sniffing different things and they're bringing it in the house. And let's face it, if you have a dog, they're in your sphere, right? That whole thing where it's like you share a microbiome with the 5 people you spend the most time with. I mean, I get it. They're not a person, but they're certainly in your sphere. And I just think when it comes to pets, to me, it's a no-brainer. I think they bring so much more joy than the small risk they may bring to the, whether it be MARCoNS or Actinos or dirt in your house, or to me, it's a no-brainer. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. So I haven't had a dog or a pet in 20 years, and having our puppy, or now our dog, he has brought unexplainable amount of joy and love that I already thought I have an abundance of love, and knowing just in a few months that level of love and the oxytocin released, and yes, he can sometimes smell like urine and all that, and I'm sure there's worry about getting ill, but it is so worth it.
Hmm.
There are so many studies about loneliness. And I thought about this because in the book, I talk about how we really need to have human connection. But if you don't have human connection, it's a really good next step. The level of
Oh, yeah.
oxytocin that you feel and that joy and love when you come home from work or even the grocery store and your dog is waiting for you as
I
if
go
you
take
were
the garbage
gone.
out, and my dog is jumping at the door like I went out for 2 hours.
Yes, that level of loyalty and love, and you are the best thing that has ever happened to these
Yep.
pets. That stuff you feel is so good in regulating your nervous system for healing, for the desire of hope of I need to make it another day even for my pet so that I
Yep.
can go to the park with my pet. So I think again, it's this balance, and granted, it could be that we're both faith-based. I think there's a level of we cannot let fear take over because once we have
100%.
fear, we are basically saying I'm not in control, and the big boogeyman of illness is going to
Yep.
take over my life, and I have no control over that. I could try a diet, I could try this and that, but essentially we could make everything in the CIRS protocol really fear-mongering if we wanted to, right? So if we were like,
Yeah.
yeah, throw away your mattress, but then go get it here, and this happens, and I'm not gonna even talk about it, but it's we can make it because it's invisible, and that invisibility makes everything super scary. But before you knew about CIRS, we weren't as scared about going out, and there probably were some benefits of going out and meeting friends and having a dog and all that. So I think that there needs to be a check on how much you allow this illness to fear you or make you scared, and you have to trust in healing. There was a person in our CIRS group every month she came and or every couple weeks she came to our call and she would say, I pray over my CSM that this will heal me. And she was still struggling with pain and brain fog. And just recently she joined and said, I have my brain back. I have my health back. Right. And it's many of the calls she was traveling. She was being exposed probably to certain moldy places. And that did not stop her from living her life. I know there's a balance with that. Like you said, when you get your blood work, you probably don't want to get exposed. And there might be some drawbacks to getting exposed, but you cannot live in fear. You cannot live in a bubble. And so I think these things are really important. And so if you have a dog, love on it and
Yep.
have that connection because your joy that you feel, that happiness, that love that is oozing out of you, that allows for healing. And so that's what you need
100%.
to remember. That level of MARCoNS, I mean, they don't know for sure if we're getting it from dogs, but it is not a reason to then say, I don't want a dog or
No,
I got to get rid of my dog. I mean, the loss that you'll feel is probably not going to be worth it. And so
I
I think
totally agree.
whatever you need to do to support your nervous system, not get scared. I think not watching a ton of mold content, because I know mold is getting more popular. You don't want to watch a ton of it because they're going to make you think of, oh my gosh, I didn't even think of that scenario and this scenario and
Right.
that scenario. And it's at what point are you going to live? And so
Yeah.
I think it's, go
I
ahead.
tell our clients all the time, well, I mean, they're our clients, right? So they're already working with us. And I say, listen, you already chose to work with us. I'm thrilled to be working with you. You're thrilled to be working with me. You can stop Googling now. Like, you can just, we have a plan, stay in your lane, live your life. When we get on calls, we'll talk about what next steps are. If you have a question, reach out, we'll jump on a session. Like, you have a plan now. Just relax. Like, you don't have to read everything. You don't have to listen to everything you hear. Like, it's time to relax now.
Yeah,
Let me worry for you, you
right.
know?
Oh, exactly.
Like, and I know it's not that simple, but we can boil it down to be more simplistic for people, you
Yeah,
know?
and I think the part where people get worried is when things aren't working or they're starting to feel bad, and so they start going down the checklist of, oh, am I in exposure? Do I have this? Do I have that? Is that why
Yeah.
that's happening? Or they get the results of their lab work back and they're like, oh my gosh, this means I'm still in exposure. But I just gave you the example of TGF. There's so much that science does not know. And I just
Hmm.
hope that people have the belief that they can heal, because that will carry you a lot. That's why there are so many people that do CIRS, mold, different practitioners doing different binders, different protocols, different diets other than carnivore. And yet there's still some level of healing. And I
Yep.
think there is some stuff that we cannot tangibly say is part of a protocol, whether it's the energy, whether it's the connection, whether it's the belief of hope that we feel that brings extra healing. And you have to double down on those things. The love you feel for a dog, the trust you have with your practitioner, the belief that this protocol can work. And
Yep.
even if you run into a blip, you don't go, oh my gosh, see, I knew it. This protocol isn't the answer. Healing is very messy and it's all over the place. And
Totally.
if you just trust the process to a certain extent, then I think there is a lot of stuff that is part of healing that is not measured by science. And so that's where I think symptom trackers are so important. That gives you, it instills hope in people that, hey, maybe I'm still waking up one time a day, but at least I'm not waking up three times a day. And so
Yep.
the tracking reminds you of, hey, this is where you used to be. So, because it's so easy as humans to complain of like, but I'm not better yet. I'm not better like all the carnivores out there, all the SIRS healed that have
Mhm.
no symptoms now. And I think healing for majority of people is a process. And so if we could just
100%.
trust the
100%.
process. The last question I want to ask you is about, when do we start thinking maybe it's something beyond SIRS?
Hmm. So that's going to be a similar, not same, but similar answer to around that 3 month mark. But I think it also goes a lot deeper because we get very invested in our clients, right? Like, by the time they're working with us, we know them really well. We have quite a bit of paperwork on them. We're meeting with them regularly, and some of their history, right? So it's not like you're going into it totally blind. So if around the 3-4 month mark and they're in a clean environment and they're binding on some level and they're, following a gut protocol and taking fish oil and, drinking clean water and doing most of the things that should be done, and we're not seeing improvement, that's when you start to need to sort of tap into their history and say, like, okay, what are some of the symptoms that are completely not going away? Do we need to, think about, like a detailed Lyme panel, co-infections, which is a really common one. Unfortunately, a lot of the symptoms for SIRS and Lyme and co-infections do sort of fall pretty next to each other. So I think it's around that time frame, that like 3-4 month time frame. If nothing's really improving, it's a pretty decent time frame to say we might want to look into something else.
Yeah, the only caveat I'll put with the 3 month mark is if you are doing 3 months of the SIRS protocol, not if you were starting with us and then doing
Right.
carnivore, gut
Yes.
healing, and then SIRS,
Yes.
because that's all different
Yes.
protocols in a sense. But I'm on the same page with you. I think that, well, one thing we do, which I love, well, I mean, obviously I'm biased with that, but is that when we do the SIRS blood work, we test for EBV. And if people are super high on EBV, we know
Right.
for sure there's other stuff going on other than SIRS.
Yes.
And so Yeah.
Well, the full CIRS blood work gives so many clues that help us when things are not improving because we
Yep.
have so many thyroid markers on there and a CBC and CMP, and you can really follow the patterns, especially when you're looking at it through a functional lens and not just lab norms. What is that like running joke where it's like, sometimes lab norms just want to keep you like breathing. We want to keep you feeling good, not just breathing. But I think that, it's really knowing your client too. And where it's like, okay, enough is enough. We should look into something else. But yes, you made a very good point where it's like if they're working with us through carnivore and they've been very diligent on carnivore for like, 6, 7, 8 months, that would be a time frame when you might want to say, maybe we should look into CIRS or maybe we should look into Lyme or, something like that, because that's very different than just, on the CIRS protocol. Yes.
What would you say about Actinos?
I would say that I've never seen someone, I personally, in all the years I've been working here, I've never seen someone heal doing the harsh Actinos protocol of the antifungal soap, scrubbing daily, sometimes twice a day, the intense cleaning with high chemicals. I've never seen it improve someone's health. I've seen it only stress people out more than I've seen anything else stress them out.
We had one person that said their skin was better, but it was very temporary. So I mean, I'll throw that. That was the only person I've seen myself is after we followed it to the letter for 6 months to a year blindly without much research. And then when I dug into, is this helping? Because a lot of our clients are having
Mhm.
skin issues all of a sudden. And so then we wrote the long article. So when we say beyond SIRS, we usually rarely ever go down the Actinos protocol because I think just from a common sense perspective to any of you watching, 99% of the world of functional medicine, even conventional, does not treat Actinos. Yet there are so many stories of healing in the functional
Mhm.
medicine space that don't go into SIRS. They might do other mold protocols. So how are they getting better if we know the level of Actinos and how pervasive it truly is? So how are these people that never do a skin protocol and wipe off their skin microbiome, how are they healing if Actinos is the thing? And
Right.
then how many people are really wiping down their walls on their home? I'm not saying not to do small particle clean and clean their house. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying doing the Actinos
Right.
protocol. And if only a couple thousand people are in the world are doing this protocol, I just like I want it to make sense. And if we saw in our practice that people work with the Actinos, it's an easy out, right? SIRS isn't working enough for you.
Right.
It's Actinos, and then your markers come out. Well, Actinos is part of your normal skin microbiome, and sure, it might be imbalanced, but if you remediate your home, there shouldn't be much more Actinos. And then if you're using the binder because it's the same protocol, and then if you have good hygiene, essentially, why would Actinos be a problem? And then if you go out, like here's fear mongery stuff, but you go out and you're gonna get exposed to everyone's skin Actinos.
Absolutely.
So I challenge and we have all the nuance and details of why we're not for the Actinos protocol and I'll put it in the notes. But it's just something, if you're stuck and the reason they're saying you're stuck is Actinos, I really challenge, I really, really challenge if that is truly the reason.
I couldn't agree more on that one.
Well, thank you so
Couldn't
much
agree
again
more.
for joining me, Cheryl. I'll have to have you
Yeah.
on to have these. Like, we'll see what the community says because I know that we get nuanced, and but for some people they need that nuance
Yeah.
because something's not working enough. And so, if you're watching this and or listening, and you have more questions and you want us to do more deep dives like this and have the real talk, just let us know and put in the comments, and we will try to address it. But thanks again, Cheryl, for
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, guys, I hope that this information gave you some areas to consider, some conversations to have with your practitioner, and areas to consider if you are not healing enough. I cannot stress enough how important your mindset, the way that you view the world, and how much healing you're having by regulating your nervous system. Obviously, we have our mind body program, but beyond that, it is so important to have connection and community and not feel loneliness. That's where I think a dog has a bigger reward than even any risk that it can bring to your life. Healing is so multifaceted, and I wish it was just this one thing, but it often isn't. And there are so many things that are not tangible that is part of healing that science or research does not show or have proof of. It's why some people that get a life sentence of you only get to live this certain amount ends up beating it and lives many, many more years, if not decades. There's something beyond science sometimes. And so if we can tap into what makes us human, what makes us whole, what makes us thrive and feel joy and love, these are things that really bring healing. And so if there are certain things that we can do for our system and not be based in fear, not be based in anxiety, nourish the body with fatty meats that support wellness and support our mental health. These things are so important in healing, and they are just not talked about enough in the CIRS community. Okay, guys, make sure to eat a lot of meat. Take care of your bodies because it is the only place you have to live. I will talk to you later. Bye, guys.